Welcome to the Dear Church podcast.
Wait, but you got to do like a
otherwise known as the DCP.
Yeah, it is though.
Yeah, welcome to DCP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, but you have to do like you have to do like a short brief intro before the intro. You know what I'm saying? Normally it's like what day it is and date, kind of. You know what I mean? Do you want me to do it? Do you want me to do it?
Welcome to the Dear Church podcast.
Wait, that's
or otherwise known as the DCP. This fine Monday morning.
Yep.
DCP stands for Doing Christ's Protocol.
Whoa, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Double meaning.
Ditching cruel propaganda.
We do that as well.
Where we exist to fill
Wait,
your
no,
eyes
you didn't even do the
and
thing.
your ears with the study of God's word for his people of all times and places. That's it.
No, we don't. Brian just rolled the intro. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang. I think so. People, I think, are wondering why I always introduce you to, but there is a reason behind it, a sanctified reason.
Yes.
And we have with us Pastor Eugene and Chunsuk. I think so. There's been some, what's the word?
Hoopla.
Yes, hoopla.
Shenanigans.
There's been some hoopla
Shenaniganery.
concerning tomfoolery, concerning Chunsuk's lack of words on the podcast. So
Yeah.
I think Chunsuk needs to speak more.
I'm busy out here
Doing what?
making sure that our volume stays low.
Yeah. So Chunsuk, if you could contribute a little more today, people want to hear your thoughts, and I know you have plenty. So today we are continuing our. This wasn't even supposed to be a series, but it's turning into a series
Of the 7 deadly sins.
of just
Things that
sins.
Sam has preached on Saturday.
I mean, both of those, yeah. So
That's true.
maybe we should do the 7 deadly sins. Makes sense. But
Sins of the tongue. Is it one of those?
Yeah. So just sins. But I mean, these are again sins that are maybe even looked over in the world today. We talked about this a lot last week, but sins that are glorified in the world, sins that are seen to be genuine. So, for example, the sins of the tongue, we view when someone is unfiltered, we view them to be genuine, or we view them to be real or raw versus being filtered and just kind of stifled. And so is that what the Bible says about the tongue? Are we supposed to filter or are we not? Is the truth an unfiltered tongue, or are we to remain filtered throughout the day, no matter what kind of situation that you are in? That is what we will be talking about this morning. There are a bunch of verses regarding the sins of the tongue. I wanted to read a couple of them for us. James chapter 3 says, "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For we all stumble in many ways. And if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. If we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. The tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, or a grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water." And that is from James chapter 3. Just one more, and this is from Matthew chapter 15, verse 11, and this is what Jesus says about the tongue. "It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth, this defiles a person." So it seems like throughout the Bible, we see the importance of bridling the tongue and the, I guess, the negative of the sins of the tongue, the damnableness. Is that word damnableness? Damnableness of the sins of the tongue.
Mm.
So, this sin is a serious one, although the world may not always represent it as such. But is this really doable? Is it really possible for us to tame the tongue? I mean, James chapter 3 makes it seem like this is an impossible task. Is this really doable? And how can we fight against the sins of the tongue? And also, if you can help us just kind of identify what the sins of the tongue are. Is it cursing? Is it, is it lying? Is it slandering? Is it gossiping? What are we talking about here? What is the Bible talking about when it says the sins of the tongue?
Yeah, there's a lot. Let's say we talk a lot.
Who?
I'm just, a random person. Let's just call him Sam Yang. Let's say Sam Yang talks a lot.
That's a very specific random person.
Just random. All right, let's call him SY. But what happens is when this person talks a lot, this person sins a lot. And we see that, well, James 3 is the most comprehensive. It's the longest running teaching on the tongue. That's why you got all these other places about the tongue. But James 3 it's an elaborate explanation of why the tongue, or just first of all, there's a warning, then the explanation of the warning through, the disproportionate power that the tongue has, through, all these other things that it continues to go on. But if we read Proverbs 10:19, it might give us a little bit of an entryway to understanding James 3.
Proverbs 10:19 reads, "When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent."
So that word for lacking is not ceasing. It doesn't stop. So when words are many, transgression or sin continues to flow. I think that's the picture that we can see here. But if you put a restraint on your lips, it's like putting a stop on the flow. That person is prudent or wise. And so here, I think that's what James 3 is really talking about here. How do we tame the tongue? Is it possible? Is it possible to restrain the tongue? And he first goes on to share about the necessity of the restraining before he talks about the possibility of restraining, right? So you can say it's impossible to tame the tongue, but is it necessary? So that's one of those things where I think it's a wonderful way of writing. It shows us the severity, just the degree of seriousness we should take when taming the tongue. And he gives you like multiple metaphors too, right? Like a rudder of a ship and things like that.
Yeah.
And so one thing that we should start by talking about when it's talking about the tongue is verse 1. Verse 1 is exactly why society is in such a mess right now. And verse 1 is, "Not many of you should be teachers, my brothers," right? For we know that those who teach will be judged with greater strictness. I think you read that first, yes?
Yes.
All right. So our teachers who do not know how to restrain the tongue, or our teachers who don't know the level of how much they should talk, meaning they don't know either through their competency level or they're talking way too much, so beyond their competency, they're the ones that will be judged because through them also judgment is brought. Does that also make sense?
Yeah.
And so when we have leaders, when we have teachers, when we have college professors or elementary school teachers that continue to teach this nonsense, those are the people that are literally bringing in destruction into society by teaching what they're teaching. That's why he's saying, actually, maybe you shouldn't be teachers at all. It's better if you just stay silent and not say anything rather than bring judgment not only to yourself, but to other people. And so, that's rough, right? And so verse 2 goes on by sharing like who's perfect. There's only one person that was perfect in all his words, and that's Jesus. So what do we do? And I think that's how we should start. We should start by looking at our prime example, the paragon of
Paragon.
of you know of man, right? Of what we should be doing.
Perfection.
And so he is the one that teaches us, and through his words, we ought to be shaped. Our words should be shaped as well. And so that's where the bits and bridles, the rudders, and all these things come to play, because without Jesus, what are we putting bit and bridle to? Where is our rudder taking us? We don't know what is the restraint or the constraint that we should be starting to put on ourselves. And so I think that's the first part. Know Christ, know what his words said, know how he spoke, know how he walked, and follow in his footsteps.
So we know the difficulty of it. We know the importance of it. And we know who to look towards as a role model of it. But what is it exactly? What are the sins of the tongue? And I think some people may be confused. Like, for example, is it vulgar speech? Because, I mean, for example, something that's considered vulgar 50 years ago isn't something that's considered vulgar today. Some words that have been twisted and perverted today weren't that way 50 to 100 years ago. And so what are we talking about when we say sins of the tongue? Like, what do we mean by that?
Generally speaking, I would think that we could categorize sins of the tongue with speaking untruthfulness. So if you're not speaking truth, so your tongue isn't conveying truth, that's a sin of the tongue.
Do you mean lying or do you mean
all of it? Even truths that would lead to, let's say, destruction.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that makes any sense, but, you're like, well, I didn't technically lie. Well, when kids say that, I didn't technically lie.
Yeah,
it's like, well, you didn't tell the truth. And so what do parents mean by you didn't tell the truth? There was a truth that needed to be conveyed, but your tongue didn't convey it. That's what it means. Do you want to give an example of what Adeline did to you?
So let's just say I called Chunsuka. Is that, I'm not lying.
What do you mean?
When you say truths, I'm not quite sure what you mean. Because do you mean the truth as in like, okay, so if I'm to tell the truth and I lie about the truth and I am lying, and that's bad, that's sins of the tongue. But what if I call somebody a name? What if I make an inappropriate joke? What if I, use vulgar language, inappropriate, perverted language? I'm not telling the truth.
Yeah, I mean, sins of the tongue. Well, now that I said the truth part, let's give another dimension of defining this. It is, and this is according to James, it is not being able to master it.
Okay.
So, in a sense, you are wildly out of control with your tongue. You cannot control your tongue. Your tongue basically controls you. And that is also a sin of the tongue, if I may. And so the picture that James is putting out, and remember, this is one of the most comprehensive parts in the Bible when it talks about the tongue and the sins of the tongue, is he's saying this is like an uncontrollable thing that must be controlled, like taming a wild beast. You could do that, but no one can. So there is a comparison put here. So just as we can tame wild beasts, we're supposed to tame the tongue, and yet it's a near impossible task. Meaning, think about a wild beast you have to tame. Taming the tongue is going to be harder than that.
Yeah.
Like infinitely in degree in doing that. And so that's something that we ought to remember when he starts off James 3 with that little metaphor.
So I guess what I'm also trying to ask is, to what standard are we supposed to, and I know you said Jesus before, but to what standard are we supposed to apply that to? And I want to read for us Ephesians 4:29. It reads, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." So I guess my question is, to what standard are we supposed to measure our tongue against? Does that mean that everything that we say has to be good for building up? What if I'm angry? What if I'm annoyed. Um,
Yeah, I know I'm going on a bigger, almost philosophical kind of sense on
mhm.
tongue, but let's go to Romans 3.
Romans 3:19 reads, "Now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be stopped and the whole world may be held accountable to God."
So, when is every tongue or mouth stopped? That's the goal. So, when you actually see the thing, you don't need to say it.
Mm,
When you don't see the thing, you try to explain it. So, this is, I know it sounds a little philosophical, but stay with me here. When I see God, I don't need to talk about God anymore.
okay.
I don't need to explain it.
Yeah.
Every mouth is stopped. When you actually understand the gospel, that's why people they have tears run down their eyes. They're not just babbling.
Yeah.
This is why I think babbling in prayer is such a terrible, terrible thing. Sometimes your mouth should just be stopped. But if there's never an occasion like that,
Uh-huh.
then I think you're in trouble. Just discipline wise, just strictly discipline wise, there's something wrong. But there is an occasion where every mouth is stopped, right? There's an occasion where you're going to actually see the thing, and you don't need to actually explain it because it's going to be so comprehensive, so full, so complete in its presentation that you don't need to say anything. Saying anything will actually take away from it. Okay.
Okay.
And so when people talk too much, sometimes you're like, wait, just enjoy the thing. Please, just enjoy. Because them actually talking takes away. Does that make sense? So I know some people just need to cope and they need to be able to kind of translate what they're trying to feel, and they talk more and more and things of that nature. And then the person next to them, I mean, you can even think of a sitcom or some kind of movie scenario where this is displayed probably pretty often is when the partner or the person next to that person goes, shh, just enjoy. Please just enjoy the moment. Can I just have a quiet moment? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so there is a time, and those are the times where you recognize that you actually see the fullness of what it is. Or it's just beyond what I can say because the tongue is a finite object trying to explain things that are too great for it.
Mm.
And so when we say things, that's something that we should recognize because, I know we talked about the deadly sins before, but one of the things the tongue is primarily guilty of is pride, which is one of the 7 deadly sins, right?
Uh-huh.
And pride, because tongues make great boasts. And that's also in the word, right? And so what boasts does it make? It makes boasts that it cannot fully comprehend. We call that articulation.
Mm.
Things that we cannot fully say. It boasts as if it does know it. And so when you are speaking, you should be humble in your speech, not proud. And the way you are humble in your speech is if you put restraints. So if you say, oh, well, then what are the specific sins? Is lying a sin of the tongue? Yes. Is boasting a sin of the tongue? Yes. What are they? Just rattle on anything that the tongue does that's of pride and that's not of humility. Rattle on anything that the tongue does that is not complete in its description when you're supposed to tell a complete description of the truth and it does not. Those I would consider all sins of the tongue. A shortcoming, a weakness, falling short, hamartia, right?
Mm. So what I'm wondering is, I think for the general audience, everyone listening, when you assume sins of the tongue, they would just assume saying bad words, making inappropriate jokes, using vulgar words.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is what we do in our confession of sin in our church services too. There are sins of commission and omission. When you fail to speak, that's also a failure of the tongue, right? There are
Mhm.
times that we do need to speak up. And so it's the things that you're supposed to live up to by what we've been given. Tongue is a very, very, very powerful object. What does it say in the Psalms where the gentle tongue is like the tree of life
Mm.
and perverseness is in the breaking of it, right?
Yeah, this is Proverbs 15, verse 4. A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit.
Yeah, and the perverseness in it is a twisting of it. And when you twist something for the tongue, I think James talks about it in verse 6. When you twist it, your root changes. The source of what you're starting to talk about is not heaven. And that's why he goes into like wisdom from the world, wisdom from heaven, right? And so there's a wisdom of the world that's of Satan. And in verse 6, it talks about the tongue is set aflame by
Yeah.
Gehenna. And
Yeah.
I think you mentioned it last week, right?
Yep.
And so that's the source. The source is not heaven. When you're talking now, the source is hell. And so when people speak, if they're not speaking with the source and the wisdom that is of heaven, that is godly, then what is that source? Because James only talks about 2 sources.
Mm.
There's not like 16 and one
Yeah.
of them's heaven,
Yeah.
one of them's Gehenna. And so if it's not of heaven, what is it? And how do you know it's of heaven? It's perfect. It's Jesus. So that's the standard. That's why the standard is so high. Not only because the tongue is such a small thing, but such a powerful thing, but because it's so powerful, then there's more responsibility. There's more, weight behind it. It's Uncle Ben who said famously, with great power comes great responsibility. Maybe the best line Stan Lee ever wrote in the Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
But it's true. And it comes from Lord Acton's thing where Uncle Ben puts it in a positive, but it comes from Lord Acton's power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
And so the more powerful something is, the greater caution, maybe extreme caution, we ought to take. Isn't that true for anything though, right? If you wield a gun is a very extremely lethal and powerful weapon.
Yeah.
You can't just wave it around in the air. You have to take good care with extreme caution because one, mishandling and someone's life could just be gone.
Yeah.
And that's the weight that James is showing us the tongue has. So, yeah.
So I appreciated the conversation of sources. There are 2 sources. One is heaven and the other is hell. And so kind of, I guess, understanding that and measuring up our speech to that thought and that text in the Bible is helpful. But we talked about Jesus being the perfect standard and how he is the paragon, I think you said, right, of perfection, of humanity. I'm wondering though, so can you tell us how Jesus spoke? Because I think today a lot of people can say, well, Jesus just spoke love, 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 love. That's all that he did. And that's kind of a common misconception that people may have, right? And just creating their own Jesus. I think you talked about this in a sermon about a month ago, about how people make up their own Jesus in their mind. And they say, my Jesus would have been at the front of the pride parade, or my Jesus would have said only loving words to the LGBTQ community. So if we are upholding Jesus to be the perfection of speech, how did Jesus speak? Because it wasn't always just love, 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 love.
No. He's the one that said it himself. Like, I only say what the Father told me to say. He does the Father's will. He set a great example for us to follow where we know if you want to do what's best, who knows what's best?
Yeah.
You follow that, right? And so we're always seeking the will of God. I don't know, people these days are like, oh, I want free will. What about free will? You have free will. Absolutely, you have free will. And in your free will, wouldn't you want to do the will of God? And so there is a prescriptive kind of will that we are given through the Word of God. Are you going to do that? Or are you going to do whatever you think is good?
Right.
And so, when you truly believe that God's will is perfect, it's great and something that we ought to follow with every fiber of our being, then yeah, let's do that. Let's absolutely go for it. And if we fall short of it, you know what? We'll exhort each other. We'll correct each other. If we have to, we'll even reprimand each other. We'll, encourage each other to do that.
So I think the difficulty with that, and I think the difficulty with WWJD as well, is if someone is listening to apply this truth to their lives, would the best way of doing that be, I want to say this, is this what Jesus would say? Right? Because I think that's the issue with WWJD is sometimes you just kind of make up what Jesus would do. Like, oh, like would Jesus do this or would Jesus do that? And then we kind of logically deduce from our own mind of what Jesus would do and wouldn't do, and we just kind of follow that. And so that's not always the best thing to do, I think, because we don't know what Jesus would do in a particular situation. Sure, I mean, the scriptures tell us who Jesus was, but it doesn't mean that we can apply it to every single situation, right?
Yeah. I think what's better than WWJD is what WDJD, what did Jesus do? And secondly, I would think, what do I think Jesus would do is different.
That's exactly
what
the point.
Jesus do.
Right.
And so a lot of things that we do is not perfect. It's wrong. And that's why we lead the repentant life. And then we repent. We go back and be like, oh, that wasn't God's will. I was wrong. I wonder why. Is it because I have a prideful heart? Is it because here I was somehow, my vision was obfuscated by something else. I was looking at something else more intently than I should have when I should have been looking at this more or something like that. We garner wisdom. We gain wisdom. We're not all wise from the start. We're not Jesus.
Right.
And so when it applies to us, we should take a little bit of humble pie with our answers. And that is, I think to the best of my ability, this is it. But if you have something else to say to add on, I'll definitely take that advice, right? And so that's even in Proverbs where you're supposed to take a lot of counsel. That's what the wise man does. The fool doesn't take any. And so you want to do that to the best of your ability, but you do that knowing that you are not Jesus, but you do want to be like Jesus. So in the spirit of WWJD should have been, I want to be like Jesus.
Yeah.
But instead, it predominantly became, oh, Jesus would definitely do this and I need to do that kind of thing, when you don't know. Because, even when it comes to morality, sometimes it's like some things are adiaphora, some things are neutral, right? Like technology.
Right.
But then what would Jesus do about technology? And all of a sudden you have a moral stance on it, which is what? Not even, Jesus didn't even say it about the Roman coin. He said, pay taxes to Caesar. And so those are things where people already were, making moral claims on things like currency and money and things of that nature. And so, no, I don't think we know the mind of Jesus completely in that sense. But that's why I would do humble pie, where we would do the best of our ability because we still got to live and we don't want to fall short. So we do want to be like Jesus in that sense. And so to the best of your ability, do what you have to do. And then if you're wrong, then repent, go back, turn around from those errors of your ways. And that's what it means to live a repentant life. That is the reformed way. Yeah. Because there is one standard, and that's a standard we have to know. When we don't know is why we sin. So with that kind of fervor and passion, that kind of, just oomph behind all that we do, we go try to adhere to the standard. But also knowing that it's because of the grace of God we are able to do that. That's why there's joy in it instead of this kind of fatalistic, this kind of sad way of looking at things or legalistic way of looking at things, right?
So if someone listening to this was thinking, starting today, I'm going to be more like Jesus in my speech. And I think this has to do with the broader concept of sanctification as well. But what kind of pastoral advice would you give to someone besides speaking less, how they would glorify God in their speech?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm surprised. No, this is about the tongue, isn't it? I should be more encouraging. Well, asking God for wisdom on how to speak is very important.
Yeah.
Because every single word has meaning. If it has meaning, it has weight. So you don't want to speak frivolously. You don't want to speak too little. You want to speak just enough. That takes a lot of wisdom. It takes wisdom that none of us has. And that's why we need to continue to ask for wisdom. You know what it means to be single-minded, to have one purpose, right?
Yes.
And it's soli Deo Gloria. That's your
Yeah.
single purpose.
Yeah.
I want to glorify God in my words. Now, people taking this will think that I mean don't say the F word.
Yeah. I mean, you shouldn't though.
Well, this is why that's a very deep question. Would I rather hear someone tell me get out of the way when a train is coming when they say the word get out of the way with the F word, or someone not using the F word and not telling me to get out of the way? Does that make sense? Well, and then you go, well, what kind of ferocity? Then if someone says get out of the way when a train is about to hit me with the F word, and another person says you might want to get out of the way, which one would I rather hear? And so some people are like, well, you definitely shouldn't use expletives. What's the purpose behind expletives? Expletives actually take away from what you really mean and how you want to say it in a reverent and honoring manner.
Okay.
You don't use those expletives in those cases. And that's why, is there a way to show your seriousness, the gravity of certain situations, the emergency in certain cases, the best way you can? And is an expletive necessary? I think the answer is no. Expletive is not necessary. But if someone doesn't have that, let's say, capacity, and they only know one or two things, why would I want to hear an untruth than something that could potentially save my life, and it just happens to have expletives? Like, how dare you talk to me that way? This is why I have a big problem against people who go, well, I know what you're saying, and I think it's true, but I didn't like your tone. I hate that so much. Tone is not primary. Tone is secondary. I wish people would get that. If you hear what I am saying and you didn't like my tone, then you can say, I didn't like the tone. I appreciate what you said. And then you can move on, correct yourself. But that's not what people say. People go, I don't like your tone. That's why I'm going to reject the truth that you said.
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to focus on the truth. I'm going to focus on your tone.
Right.
Which is, again, is secondary.
Right.
Which is stupid. That's to your detriment. If it's true, then you hold on to the truth. If it's told to you in a bad way, then woe is you. But at least you're alive.
Yeah.
Your feelings are hurt, sure, but the train did not run you over. So when people talk to me about expletives, they might be shocked, but I don't mind as much. I'd rather you not lie to my face. But if you are well disciplined, self-controlled enough not to use the expletive, and you're using the expletive, then you're dumb. Then you're not wise. Then you're in a state of foolishness.
Yeah.
But if you're wise enough to do it, that's great. But not everybody's going to be like at a level 10 of self-control like you want them to be. And not everybody is at a level 10 self-control if they don't curse. And so some people think that just because they're not cursing, these guys are good guys. That's not true either. So cursing isn't a standard for me. It's one way that we can walk in sanctification, but it is not the standard of sanctification. Does that make sense too?
Yes. But so
yeah, you're listening to this, you're like, "Ooh, Puge won't mind if I curse in his face."
I'm not saying I'm going to do that.
That's not what I'm
Seems
saying.
like might, but I'm just saying.
Don't say it, man.
No, I'm not going to say. But
we already had to bleep you out once in this podcast.
But wait a minute. So, okay. I would rather have someone curse me out and get me to move out of the train's way than softly say, hey, may I suggest that you possibly get out of the way? So I get that. But then let me ask you this, and I think this maybe goes in a little deeper, because obviously people think, oh, if you swear, that's a sin. You can't do that. But is it a sin? And why is it a sin? And if it's not a sin, why is it not a sin? Is it a sin?
So swearing is what it is. If it is indeed swearing, then you are sinning against your brother or you're sinning against God. That's the definition of swearing.
Okay.
We call them curses for a reason. So when you curse, you're not blessing. It's called a curse. We literally have that in the defining of the term.
Right.
So when we're using an expletive, what we are doing is we're using a word that is actually degrading the person or the object.
Okay.
or God.
Right.
That's why we choose not to speak in a manner that is irreverent or dishonoring. And so even when I talk, even when I speak, those words should be things where it would honor God. And so would you use the F word when you talk to God?
No.
Why is that so clear? And why is it not clear when you talk to a human? You can use the F word.
It feels dirty.
No, I'm saying so some people would never say the F word to God, but they would easily say it to their brother or sister.
Right.
There's something wrong with that. I would say double check your heart on that one.
Okay.
And so when you use the F word, maybe you don't know it. Maybe you're trying to start beef.
But you know, some people say I wasn't cursing.
Quarrelsome.
That's true.
You're trying to be, edgy. I don't know.
But some people might say I wasn't cursing at you.
Cursing with you?
Not with, but I was cursing like alongside.
Yeah. People say things that they don't know what they're saying all the time. When people are like, they see something terrible and they go, Jesus Christ.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not believers. That's actually called blasphemy for a reason.
Yeah.
And so even when I was working on the trading floor, the floor manager next to me would say, Jesus Christ. And as a Christian, what do I do, right?
Right.
What do I be like, hey, why are you blaspheming my God?
Hey, you pagan.
Yeah. So I didn't. This is 20 years ago. So I would just joke. I would say, yes. And then he would say, oh, not you, the other one. And then he would never say it again because I would remind, like in his own words, he was being reminded of who he's calling when he says Jesus Christ.
Right.
The other one.
Right.
Not me.
Right.
And so, I'm not saying that's the best way to handle someone saying Jesus Christ in front of you, right?
Yeah.
But it is blasphemy. So when you're saying you're not cursing at someone, what does that even mean? Because your words reach someone or something, some being, I suppose, and who hears all words? And that's why we got to go back to Proverbs 10, where it says, when words are many, sin is boundless. Transgressions are unceasing. It keeps on flowing. So, when we consider our words, we should consider our words very heavily.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the very least.
I mean, because the reason why I say that is because when you talk about cursing, I think people have a lot of different views about it, right? So people might say, well, 50 years ago, it wasn't a bad word. Some people might say, I wasn't cursing. Like, if I say I'm so bleeping tired, I'm not cursing at you. I'm not cursing at anybody. I'm just cursing for the sake of cursing, right? So people can say that. I'm not, offending you in any single way. And so then is it so bad?
Yeah, they can't express themselves in a manner that's reverent. So let's say I'm bleeping tired is different from I'm very tired.
Yeah.
And I'm bleeping tired is supposed to mean something heavier than I'm very tired. And this is where Jesus goes, let your yeses be yeses and noes be noes. If you say very, you mean very. There's nothing more than very. But that's why we're like, well, very is not strong enough for me. I need a very, very. I need a very, 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 very.
Right.
I need an infinitely very because I'm that tired, okay?
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're not bleeping tired. You're just very tired. Just say you're very tired. And that's okay. It's okay if you say it to me. I get it that you're very tired. But if you're saying you're bleeping tired, you're saying something else. You're saying you're so tired that I need to, number one, maybe get out of the way. Number two, you don't get how tired I am. So you need to, respect, I don't know, whatever it is. So you're saying something beyond what you're saying is my point.
Yeah.
So you're not letting your yeses be yeses and noes be noes. So yeah, I do think that when you're saying, I'm going to use this expletive and it's not toward you, I think you're just fooling yourself. It is toward me. That's why you're saying those words. And again, I think it's a level of, just your progression and understanding and all this, okay? And you cannot curse and be a cult leader. A cult leader is way worse off.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Than someone who's cursing, but really like the robber, the thief on the cross says, Jesus, please accept me. Please forgive me. I'd rather be the thief on the cross than a cult leader who blasphemes Jesus with their whole life.
And we read in Colossians 4:6, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. So we see even here the manner in which we are to speak But I'm curious though. I think one of the things that I would kind of that I would notice, at least in the circles that I'm a part of, is oftentimes coarse speech is used to be funny. Jokes. Are Christians? Is it wrong to be funny? Is it wrong to be coarse to be funny? Can Christians be funny, especially in a world where if it's not coarse, it's not really funny anymore? No one says, why did the chicken cross the road to get to the other side? No one thinks that's funny anymore. But if you said, why did the chicken, whatever, then it becomes funny, right? So in a world where it has to be coarse or inappropriate to be funny, is it wrong then for Christians to be funny?
I don't know. That's a multi-layered kind of question. TBH, Junseok knows. He's a multi-layer person.
He is. He's many layers. He's like a potato in that way.
Too.
Yeah.
He's a potato? Potato's just one.
Yeah, that's literally 2 layers.
No,
the
there's
skin and the inside.
Okay, so that's what I mean. So now you brought it up. We're going to put a pause on this coarseness and we'll go back. What's worse, in my personal opinion, this is my personal opinion.
You're going to say something about me, I know.
What's worse, in my personal opinion, than saying coarse language is saying something when you don't mean it. Like when you go something like, Sam, you're so good looking today. That's worse than saying you're expletive ugly.
But what?
Yeah, because that's a winking of the eye. That's a little signal to your friends or you know what I mean? To
Why
your
does it have
false
to,
witness.
Why does it have to be one of either? Why can't I just be medium? This is the worst.
So, like, let's just take an example. I'm going to make fun of Junseok.
Okay.
But
Finally.
I'm going to make it like it was by accident.
Okay.
So Junseok is multi-layered. He's an onion, but I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say he's a potato because I'm going to make fun of Junseok. Like, Junseok, you look like a potato. That's why I'm going to call you a potato.
That's not what I said.
But when people come at me, I'm going to be like, no, I meant onion. I don't know why potato came out. See, what's worse? Calling Junseok an expletive onion or a potato. Let's let the audience decide. We're going to roll a poll.
I don't know.
And you can send your votes in through podcast at cgsnj.org.
Okay, so if I'm going to be honest, I forgot. Now I'm questioning myself. Did I forget that potatoes only had one layer?
Or were you just trying to be funny? Can Christians be funny?
At the expense of other people.
Right. And I was just giving a perfect example of the question. So can Christians be funny at the expense of your friend?
This is a deep podcast today.
It is. All multi-layered potatoes.
That's Junseok. Junseok has something at the tip of his tongue.
I think with that question, you set the premise that you're already like in the culture.
Yes.
So what's funny to the culture is something that needs to be accepted as funny.
Right.
But that can already be sinful in itself.
Right. So the funny culture is already sinful.
No.
I mean, in the sense of if you look at anything that's funny today, besides slapstick, any type of like stand-up, verbal, joking, funny, it seems to mostly be vulgar or inappropriate.
I think the best comedians out there are commentators on life.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's why they're funny. They'll take things from a perspective you didn't look at and show the comedy of the reality.
Yeah.
So comedy isn't fantasy. Comedy is reality. That's why I think funny things are funny because we didn't expect it and it happens.
Yeah.
Slapstick was funny because it's something that people didn't expect. But when you do slapstick too long, everybody expects it. So it doesn't become funny anymore. That's why as civilizations or cultures progress, slapstick becomes less funny because you've seen a lot of it already. And that's why like newer cultures or cultures just developing, they still love slapstick. But as time goes on, that doesn't hold as much fun anymore, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe we're just too snobby even for our own comedy, even by me saying that. It could be. But I think comedy points to an aspect of reality that people either took for granted or they gloss over, or they, misuse, misrepresent. I don't know. Something isn't taken as it should be, and then people point it out in comedy. I
Yeah.
think that's why people do it in a funny way. The delivery is there, the timing is there, the storytelling is there.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think for me, I enjoy comedy. I enjoy stand up. I think it takes a lot of communication skill to do stand up well, because you're basically up there talking for an hour and a half, and you have people laughing basically for that long. That means they're engaged.
Yeah.
And so that's not an easy task to do. So even just on sheer skill level, I appreciate that. But again, stand up isn't for everybody, right? Not everybody likes stand up. I don't trust those people though.
But I guess the question is, how far can we go? As a Christian, how far can we go?
Yeah, I think we're always going to see where the line is, right? And then once you pass it, you know it.
Yeah.
That's a funny thing about certain things. But instead of thinking about how far we should go the wrong way, we should try to go as far as we can to the right way. So when I speak to show generosity. I speak to show nobility. I speak to show purity. I speak to show what is good. I speak to encourage. I speak to exhort. So if it is for the love of God and for the love of my neighbor and I speak, I think that is a good direction to go. When you say, what shouldn't I do? That's going to be rough for me, because that'll definitely go for me. 100% it'll go into the legalistic area.
Yeah.
I get it that you need to do negative reinforcements when you teach kids. So when you're teaching your kid, you're not going to be like, well, sometimes cursing is appropriate. Sometimes lying is appropriate.
Right,
That's not,
right.
That's not how you teach your kid. Your
Right.
kid's going to grow up confused. Abstract thinking that entails multiple layers,
Yeah.
develops over time, but it needs to be shown with principle first. You need a foundation of truth, of reality. And that's why we're not giving a dumbed down dose of truth to a kid when we teach him. We're giving them foundation. And from the foundation, you can launch into the air. No foundation, you're launching nowhere. You're going straight down into, the ground. You're going to crash and burn is what I'm saying. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with negative reinforcement when you're starting off. You don't do negative reinforcement forever. That's my point. You got to know where this is pointing to. And the pointing to has to be the good. It has to be soli Deo Gloria, for the love of God and for the love of my neighbor.
Pastor's Talk with Mark Dever and Jonathan Lehman had a really interesting podcast on pastors being funny and using humor in sermons, the way that they should use it versus the way that they shouldn't. A sermon isn't a stand-up comedic act, but to make people comfortable, to have people pay attention or remember something, humor is a great way to do that. So I guess I keep on asking these specific things because these are things that I have witnessed in even myself and other people as they have conversations, even amongst brothers and sisters in the church. And, questions like, the reasons why I asked you, are inappropriate jokes okay? It's because I've seen these jokes. Also questions like, how far can you make fun of somebody or how much can you make fun of somebody? These are all jokes that I've heard. And so I'm just wondering, when we are amongst friends, when we are amongst brothers and sisters, does it always have to be edifying? Does it always have to be, prayerful and loving? Or are we, quote unquote, allowed to have fun? And I say that because that's what people will think.
I find it interesting that communicators are always interested and they're always intrigued by comedians in the way they communicate, because they communicate on a level that's different from, let's say, a preacher.
Yeah.
When a preacher tries to be a comedian, sometimes, even if they succeed, they could have failed in their task of proclamation. So a preacher's job isn't to be funny. A preacher's job is to communicate the truth. And in their communication, they can use methods and means to communicate it, through their conviction of what they believe to be effective. I don't mind comedy. I don't mind jokes. I think there are appropriate jokes out there. There are things that are, as long as there's purpose behind it. There's purpose behind telling a joke And when you see that this joke, which was funny, is in line with its purpose, that joke becomes even better.
Yeah.
I was watching a TV show and they told a joke when it was pretty tense. And the joke was, did you know that diarrhea is hereditary? It runs in your genes.
Mm.
And so it was a very tense moment. The zombies were about to attack them.
What
And
show
so-
is this?
It's a zombie show. And then the joke was told by a young child to an adult to relieve tension. And they both went to sleep laughing, only to be woken up and eaten. No, I'm just
Oh,
kidding. They didn't
man.
get eaten.
That would be terrible.
But yeah, but there are times, and I don't think the joke was funny at all. But I was able to appreciate them appreciating the joke
I see.
because in that time and place, if I were in that position and some little kid tried to alleviate the tension so that I could finally go to sleep, I would appreciate that very much. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the joke is crass. The joke is a pun. It's a level 1 joke, but because it's a level 1 joke told and both parties know that it's a level 1 joke,
Yep.
that's what made it funny to them. They
Yep.
know this is a dumb joke and they were able to appreciate it. So, I think, see, the fact that I'm even doing this takes away from the depth of the joke. When you have to explain the joke,
Yep.
you lose it.
Yep.
So the fact that I have to explain it, takes away from why the joke is funny. Sometimes you just have to laugh and you can think about it and then move on.
Yeah.
But I think that's what a lot of times people need. People need a little break from the seriousness and weight. But if all you're doing is taking life as a joke, then obviously that's not good either.
So should I stop making fun of Chunsuk?
I don't know. If it's funny, I'll take it. Right? Junseok would also take it if it's funny.
Yeah.
Has any been funny though?
I've yet to see the day.
Yeah,
No, I've
see?
been accused
There
of
you
that
go.
many times.
You've been accused
Call me guilty of being funny. Yeah.
Let's take a poll.
Okay. Funniest in the office. Hands down. Hands down is me.
Pastor Paul.
Pastor Paul. For sure.
I see. So I mean, we know that in sermons, humor has a purpose. Even in friend groups, cliques, whatever it may be, gatherings, humor has a place. But I think an important thing to remember is that we are not to sin for the sake of humor. I think a lot of times that happens.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, again, going back to the sin of the tongue, it has a lot to do with pride. Sometimes you might just want to be funny because it's your pride. You just need to be funny. In Sociology 101, in any group setting, there's a clown, right? So, like in the office, we have an office clown, and that person needs to be funny all the time.
She does.
Makes jokes, and sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're not funny. Most of the times they're not funny, but one thing we do know is that they're clowns.
Yeah.
And so you can be a clown for a good purpose, or you could be a clown for a bad purpose. You could do it just to fluff yourself up because you need to be the funniest when you're not actually that funny. Or you could be, someone that likes to, lift the heaviness off of people's shoulders. And this is something that makes you happy as well as others. So your jokes actually make the air a little lighter.
Yeah.
So I appreciate Junseok, is my point.
I'm guilty of the lifting, heavy lifting. Yeah. So thank you for that.
I have a question. I think just taking it a different direction, I think people could take all the good things about taming the tongue and controlling it and use it as the premise on what we call PC culture today. So how does that, is that a sin of the tongue, or is that something that can be defended?
Yeah, I think PC is probably political correctness, right? That's what
Yeah.
you mean by PC. I think being PC is probably the biggest form of, or I would say, the beginnings of tyranny. You always start with PC. You always control people's speeches. Here isn't talking about controlling other people's speeches. It's about controlling your own speech. You control the speech that you get to say for the benefit of others, for the glorification of God. PC isn't that. PC is controlling people. It's controlling what people say, hoping to think that by controlling what people say, you control what people think and what people do. It's the start of tyranny. I think PC is truly evil. And any kind of promotion of political correctness, I don't like. Well, are you saying that we can say these terrible words then? I never said that. But if I'm busy going out there controlling other people's language, there's something wrong. By me controlling other people's language, that's precisely what I attain. I attain control. And that's why you see these hall monitors out there who think they're doing the bidding of the den mother when they are helping enforce this nasty woke PC culture. Was I too strong in my words?
No.
That was a great question and response. Does this mean then that we have to be quote unquote fake and speak in a fake way?
There's one staffer that we have. He talks like Nick Miller. It's very fake. I let him do it.
What do you mean you let me do it?
You didn't say it was you.
Yeah,
I know it was
what's up with
me.
that? Why do you always think everything is about you, Sam? We should talk about the sin of pride. No, I don't know. Well, I forgot the question. I just wanted to
Fakeness.
fakeness.
Because people think that if they are not allowed to be raw, if they're not allowed to be real, and that realness and genuineness is oftentimes confused with unfilteredness. And they believe that if they're filtered, they have to be fake or they have to put on a facade.
Are you saying that if you put some discipline or restriction on yourself, you're being fake? Then I think you are in a state of foolishness and you're in dangers of the fires of hell. You want to be disciplined. You want to be self-controlled. You want to put restraint on your tongue and your actions, even your thoughts, because you know that you yourself, you're not in a state of perfection right now. When you're saying you want to be authentic, what people are mistaking that for is they're thinking that me being authentic, what they're not recognizing rather, is that they believe that their current state is in a state of perfection. What does that mean to be authentic? Authentic to whom? Authentic from whom? And if you're saying authentic in the sense where I see a goal, I see a telos of what I should be, and I want to reach that. That's different from I am this now and I need the world to know. You know, I am woman, hear me roar. It's the stupidest thing ever. Like, what does that even mean? It doesn't mean anything. It should mean rather, I should be this and I will put on self-control. I will live out my life in discipline so that I can reach this goal, right? And so, yeah, that authentic, we need to express myself, whatever the case is. And we talked about expressive individualism. Those things will lead you down to a path of Gehenna.
Thank you for that. So if you could give a one phrase on what people can take away on how they are to apply this to their lives, how would you phrase that phrase?
Psalm 51 verse 15.
Psalm 51:15 reads, "O Lord, open my lips and my mouth will declare your praise."
Yeah, I think that's the heart that we should have.
Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. We'll quickly go into one current event. Today's current event.
That's the one, right?
That is the one. Today's current event is called HB 1069. And this is legislation that is waiting to be passed in the state of Florida. This is also called Don't Say Period Bill by some. What many are saying is that this bill is going to restrict and ban teenage young girls from speaking of their period and menstruation cycle to their teachers at school. This is just, I guess, the summary of this bill. Defines sex for Florida Early Learning 20 Education Code, revises provisions relating to materials for specified instruction relating to reproductive health, provides additional requirements for instruction regarding human sexuality, provides district school boards are responsible for materials used in classroom libraries, revises provisions relating to objections of certain materials and process related to objections, Revise the school principals, school district, and district school board duties and responsibilities relating to certain materials and processes. But the biggest thing about this bill is that now young girls cannot talk about their periods with their teachers. And people are very, very upset over this bill, HB 1069. I bring this up because we've talked about the Don't Say Gay bill from the Florida government. And here we have the Don't Say Period bill. Is this as bad as everyone is saying it is? What is a Christian supposed to think about this? I have my views, but
What do you think?
I think this is great. And it's not because I'm Team Florida or Team DeSantis, or as they call him, Meatball Ron. But I think it's great because kids should not be talking to their teachers about their period. I think kids should be talking to their parents about their period. I think there are exceptions to this rule, but I think you can't make rules based on exceptions. And the general way that a child should be learning about puberty and about sexuality and about human reproduction, I think should be from the parents. Now, I think oftentimes parents don't do a great job of doing this and they need to learn how to do it. So I think schools should give resources on how to do this properly. But I don't think a teenage 12-year-old girl should be going up to their teacher and talking to them about their period. So the whole thing is that it bans discussion on sexual health until grade 6. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, people are very, very upset about this, but I just wanted to see what your thoughts were, because I know we've talked about other Florida bills that have passed. And so just wanted to hear your thoughts.
Yes. I don't know. With every kind of new bill, people are just very upset that they can't talk about sex and reproductive systems without the parents' consent. And I think that's basically what a lot of people like Florida, especially if you're conservative. They like Florida for this. Whatever it is, and don't say period. Man, that's kind of crazy how if we say, like, there's a bill that says that if there's talk of even like menstrual cycles, that it should be going to the parents, not to the teachers. And then we'll just say it's a don't say period bill.
Yep.
If it's talk about, we won't teach about sexuality, even homosexuality, from the schools without parents. Then it's a don't say gay bill. That's kind of funny to me.
I mean,
So it's just, yeah, it's just definitely some twisting. Speaking of the tongue, this is definitely a twisting of sorts. So yeah, I'll side with you on this one. I don't know too much about the HB 1069 bill, but my cursory glance at what people are saying is just it still has to do with sexuality. So, whatever it is, sexual health or sex STDs, you can teach them from starting from grade 6, but anything before that, they would have to go to the parents.
yeah. I
And
mean,
so that's a very basic thing. So that's why I think they would derive the whole like menstrual cycle too from that, because it has to do with sex, right?
so Florida Planned Parenthood tweeted, first of all, they tweeted what in all caps with question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point. Then they responded saying, don't say period by Republican McLean.
Yeah.
These lawmakers are so obsessed with power and control that they're literally prohibiting young women from talking about menstruation. Mandating birth, restricting sex ed, and vetoing funding for birth control is simply not enough for them. So it's become a conversation about prohibiting young women, which is not what it's about.
Yeah.
But obviously they're going to take that way and say, wow, a kid can't talk to their teacher about their period. Why would you want a kid to be talking to their teacher about their period? Wouldn't you want the kid to talk to their mom? I don't understand. Or their dad? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, in what instance, because I'm trying to think too, in what instance has a kid ever talked to their teacher if they had an option to talk to their parents about it, and if their parents were well knowledgeable and had resources on how to talk to their kids about it? So wouldn't the first step be give the parents the resources?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just all these bills are designed to make sure that the parents are in the know, that they know what their young kids are learning, and it restricts teachers from doing things that a parent may or may not want.
Right.
You do that right now in New York City schools, and people aren't going crazy. We don't see Planned Parenthood going crazy. Where in New York City, where your wife and mine, they both work in the city, and they can't talk about their religion there.
No.
Yeah, they can't teach
No.
it. They can't even talk about it. I doubt this bill is anything to that degree,
Right.
where they can't even talk about it. It's about teaching, right? And so, even if it was to that degree, I think I would probably be on your side, where it's like, great, then have the parents talk to them about it.
Yeah.
But imagine your wife went up there and said, you know what? Jesus Christ is Lord. This is what I absolutely believe. And this is the truth. And let me tell you about him. People will be outraged.
Right.
Outraged.
Right.
And so this is kind of just an upside down world
Yeah.
where now, teachers telling young girls about their menstrual periods are so important that people will flip out when we say, or when a state says, you know what, let's have the parents tell the kids that.
Yep.
We'll give them resources, like you
Yep.
said, if they want. We'll provide whatever we can. And then, teachers will be restricted from bringing that topic up in their classrooms.
Yep.
And now people are like, what if a teacher gives birth and they can't talk about their
Right.
birth?
Right.
We'll talk about the extremes. Please always bring us to the extreme.
Yeah.
Because again, it proves the rule.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it proves the rule all the time. So yeah, if a teacher is giving birth inside the classroom, there's something wrong.
Yep.
And that's why people will question, be like, oh, what is going on here? This seems abnormal. It's like, absolutely. You're not supposed to give birth in a classroom. There was an emergency. Something happened where it shouldn't have. But how did this happen? Go to your parents, because this is a longer conversation.
Yeah.
Why is it up to the school to teach them that? If something happens in the street, is it up to the street to teach them what happened? No.
Right.
It's up to the parents. So up to a certain age, when we're giving power back to the parents, that's great. I'm happy for that.
Thank you for that. And that is where we will end this morning. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we have a discussion on pride and gluttony. Is it
You're
simple?
really going to the 7 cents, huh?
I mean, is it simple to go to a buffet? I love me a good buffet.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I haven't gone in a while. But tune in next week to find out the last time I went to a buffet. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith. Peace.